Breaking news from Down Under. As the tennis world turns its attention to the 2026 Australian Open, one of the sport's fiercest competitors, Aryna Sabalenka, is revealing something deeply personal. Something fans didn't see coming. Something that helps explain a recent shift in her energy, her focus, and her emotional rhythm on court. In her own words, she's playing with a heavy heart. And now, the world finally knows why. This isn't about an injury. It's not about a tactical change. It's about grief, raw, unfiltered, and very human. Just days before the tournament began, the tennis community was shaken by tragic news. The sudden death of Duncan Mackenzie McHargue, one of the most beloved tennis journalists in the world. For nearly 2 decades, Duncan covered the sport with a rare combination of insight, warmth, and genuine care for the players behind the headlines. He wasn't just a reporter, he was a voice fans trusted, a friend to many players, and someone who brought stories to life with integrity and heart. His interviews weren't just about results, they were about people. He understood that behind every serve and every set was a human story worth telling. His passing left a profound silence, a vacuum in the tennis world that can't easily be filled. And for Sabalenka, that silence has been especially heavy. When asked about her state of mind during recent matches, Sabalenka didn't hide her feelings. She spoke openly about feeling emotionally all over the place. That's a striking confession from a player known for emotional intensity on court, but also for fierce focus. She admitted that Duncan's passing weighed on her deeply, not just because he was a member of the tennis media, but because he was someone she respected, admired, and felt understood by, both as a player and a person. Sabalenka has always worn her heart on her sleeve. Her emotions have fueled her power, her energy, and her resilience. But when grief enters the picture, it doesn't follow the rules of sport. It doesn't respect timing or tournament schedules. It cuts through routines and shakes confidence. That's what Sabalenka has been experiencing, and now she's letting the world in on that struggle. If you watch Sabalenka's recent matches, not just the scoreline, but the rhythm, something feels different. Not worse, not broken, just unsettled. Her intensity is there, but it's tinged with a quiet vulnerability. Her fire burns, but the smile after a big point is softer. Her celebration feels subdued, and in moments where she would normally dominate with sheer force, there's a subtle pause, a flicker of distraction. That's what happens when an athlete carries emotional weight. The body can still move, the technique can still function, but the mind, the heart, becomes a variable that no training session fully prepares you for. This story reminds us that even the strongest athletes are human at their core. We're so used to seeing Sabalenka unleashed, powerful, energetic, and sometimes unstoppable that it's easy to forget what lies beyond the scoreboard. When she stepped onto the Melbourne courts this year, she brought all of herself, not just her serve and forehand. She brought her grief, her sadness, her remembrance of someone who saw her as more than a result on a page. And that's why her performance feels different. Not because she's weaker, but because she's vulnerable in a way the world rarely sees. In the world of tennis reporting, it's rare for players to publicly discuss personal grief during a major tournament. Athletes often shield their emotions to protect focus, to maintain competitive edge, and to manage public perception. But Sabalenka chose honesty. This confession is more than a quote. It's a moment of connection between a champion and fans who love the sport, not just for its athleticism, but for its humanity. When a top player shares something like this, it changes how we watch the matches. It makes every swing, every set, and every tense moment feel heavier, because now we understand there's more behind the tennis than just competition. To understand why this hit Sabalenka so deeply, you have to understand who Duncan was. He was one of those rare journalists who didn't just cover tennis, he cherished it. He knew players' stories, their journeys, their struggles, and their victories. He told those stories in ways that made tennis fans feel connected, not just to the sport, but to the people playing it. He wasn't just reporting scores, he was sharing souls. And that's why his passing affected so many people across the tennis world, especially players who felt seen and understood by him. For Sabalenka, that connection mattered a lot. Grief doesn't follow a schedule. It doesn't disappear with a warm-up. It doesn't pause for competition. It lingers. It appears suddenly. It shows up in unexpected places, in concentration, in emotion, and sometimes in the body itself. When an athlete carries grief, their focus can waver, their energy can feel fragmented, their confidence can dip, their joy can feel muted. And while a player like Sabalenka has the physical tools and mental training to continue performing at a high level, grief doesn't care about rankings or statistics. It shifts the internal landscape of competition. This is why Sabalenka's confession is so powerful. It reframes not just what we see on court, but how we see it. Sabalenka said she's been emotionally all over the place. Imagine how that feels. One moment you're laser-focused, hitting winners with conviction. The next, you're thinking about someone you respected and admired, someone who won't be covering your career anymore, someone whose questions mattered, whose perspective carried weight. It's like carrying two matches in your mind, the opponent at hand and the silent match inside your heart. This isn't weakness, this is honesty. When Sabalenka shared this revelation, the response from fans was immediate and heartfelt. Tributes poured in for Duncan Mackenzie McHargue. Supportive messages flooded social media for Sabalenka. Commentators paused to acknowledge the emotional side of sport. This story touched people because it's deeply human. It reminds us that athletes, no matter how powerful, skilled, or elite, experience loss, grief, and pain just like everyone else. And when a well-known player like Sabalenka opens up about it, it creates a space for empathy on a global scale. There's a reason this story is going viral. The world isn't used to seeing elite athletes reveal vulnerability in real time, especially during major events. We're conditioned to admire strength, resilience, and dominance. But what Sabalenka shared is something else: strength through vulnerability. She didn't make excuses. She didn't ask for sympathy. She simply told the truth. That is powerful, and it changes the way we watch every match she plays from here on out. Will this emotional weight affect her results? Possibly. Sabalenka is a fighter, one of the toughest competitors on tour. But grief adds a layer that even the greatest athletes rarely talk about. It doesn't guarantee a loss, but it does change the internal experience of competition. In close moments, when every point matters, emotional context can shape decisions, reactions, and resilience. It doesn't make her less of a champion. It makes her human. And that's something the tennis world rarely gets to see. There's also a broader conversation quietly unfolding beneath this moment, one about how grief is handled in elite sport. Athletes are trained to compartmentalize, to lock emotions away, to perform regardless of circumstance. But moments like this expose the limits of that mindset. No amount of physical conditioning or mental rehearsal fully prepares someone to compete while processing loss in real time. For Sabalenka, the Australian Open isn't happening in a vacuum. It's unfolding alongside memories, reflections, and emotional reminders that surface unexpectedly. The crowd noise, the post-match interviews, the quiet moments between points, all of it can trigger emotion. Grief doesn't always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it disrupts rhythm just enough to be felt, but not enough to be explained on a stat sheet. What makes this moment resonate is that Sabalenka didn't wait until the tournament was over to speak. She didn't package her grief into a neat retrospective. She acknowledged it while still in the middle of competition, while expectations, pressure, and scrutiny were at their peak. That choice challenges the long-standing belief that vulnerability and elite performance can't coexist. It also forces fans to reconsider how they interpret body language and emotion on court. A missed opportunity, a muted reaction, a moment of frustration. These things are often dissected tactically, but now they carry emotional context. Suddenly, performance isn't just about form or confidence, it's about emotional bandwidth. There's something quietly courageous about continuing to compete while honoring someone who mattered deeply to you. Sabalenka isn't playing through grief to prove toughness. She's playing while acknowledging that grief exists. That distinction matters. It reframes resilience not as emotional suppression, but as presence, showing up fully, even when it's hard. In many ways, this moment reflects a shift in modern sport. Athletes are beginning to speak more openly about mental health, emotional strain, and personal loss. Fans are learning to listen differently. Stories like this don't diminish competition, they deepen it. They remind us that greatness isn't just measured in titles, but in honesty under pressure. As the tournament continues, Sabalenka's matches will carry more meaning than usual, not because of expectations, but because of context. Each point becomes part of a larger human story, one unfolding quietly, without theatrics, but with immense emotional weight. And whether she lifts the trophy or not, this chapter of her journey will be remembered, not for numbers or rankings, but for the grace it takes to keep going when the heart is heavy, and the courage it takes to let the world know. This story isn't about wins or losses. It's not about seeding, rankings, or predictions. It's about life happening right in the middle of a major sports event. Sabalenka's honesty, speaking about her heavy heart, makes this more than a tennis story. It makes it a moment that transcends sport. It's about loss, resilience, empathy, and courage. It's about the reminder that behind every serve and every rally, there's a human story. And sometimes that story is grief. And when top players open that door, we see not only their athletic skill, but their emotional truth. Aryna Sabalenka didn't come to the Australian Open just to compete. She came carrying something much heavier. A tribute in her heart, a memory in her mind, and a public acknowledgement of loss unlike most fans expected. Her bravery isn't on the scoreboard. It's in her honesty. It's in sharing something deeply personal while still standing in a global spotlight. This isn't just breaking news. This is a reminder that athletes are people first. And sometimes the most profound stories in sport aren't about who wins, but about how they carry their humanity through the toughest moments.